we've got a calm coming before this storm, and the storm equals the Great Tribulation, in my opinion, that Jesus warned about.
Hey friends, thank you so much for pushing play. You know how much it means to us. And before we get started with our good friend TradCatKnight, that's Eric Gajewski from TradCatKnight, the YouTube channel, and TradCatKnight, blogspot.com, I want to offer apologies to our friend W.H. Wisecarver, author of the Resurrection series. I had W.H. on just the other day, and I didn't go to edit that audio until last night. The audio's corrupt. Thanks to Skype, been having some problems lately, and my apologies to Bill for wasting an hour of his time. Please go to Amazon, check out his books, the Resurrection series. He had a good report about the cup being more than half full as it relates to taking back our republic, and it was a nice interview, and I'm sorry that one didn't work out, Bill. And right now I want to turn our attention to TradCatKnight, Eric Gajewski, who joins us. Eric, how are you?
Doing well, Sean. Thanks for having me back on. Our first talk went nearly viral, and I'm looking forward to this second talk. So much to discuss, and any which way you want to go, I'll follow.
All right. And Eric, your expertise is in the area of the traditional Catholic Church, and I know you have a lot to say about this current Pope, Pope Francis, so we're going to get there in a second. But, you know, sort of in that vein, I think to launch the discussion with this whole calm before the storm meme from Qanon and essentially Donald Trump, I want to ask you about Q, who tweeted out, I believe it was back on November 4th, on or around November 4th, a portion of most of the Lord's Prayer. And just about a month later, around December 8th, Pope Francis came out and suggested that the words, some of the words to the Lord's Prayer ought to be changed, suggesting that in the current version of the Lord's Prayer, it said that the Lord is leading us to temptation. He wants to tweak that line. Do you think there's any significance to that Q posting and to the fact that a month later the Pope would suggest changing words in the Lord's Prayer?
Well, Sean, first to start with, there is a growing number of Catholics who don't even see Francis as the true Pope. In church history, there have been what have been called anti-popes. There's been about 50 of them. They're imposter popes, and we believe due to Benedict XVI's invalid resignation, him being forced out per canon law, that would make his supposed resignation invalid. But then also we make the case that Francis is actually a formal heretic. He's been on record as saying there's no such thing as a Catholic God. Communists make the best Christians. He has this notion of God being this God spray type of figure. Then we can throw in the whole Masonic ecumenical program in there in this building towards an establishment of a one world church. But getting to your original premise, no, this doesn't surprise us at all, because there was a pope in church history who was called Pope St. Pius X, and he warned us of these modernists. So we classify Francis as a modernist, not a Catholic. And that's what we have to make sure that at least I'm getting across the point, is that in the traditional Catholic movement, I hate to call it like that, we're just resisting these changes that happened during the Second Vatican Council in the early 1960s. And we use as a foundation this great and holy Pope who had two encyclicals. Hopefully you and your listeners can go back and reread them yourselves, because it exposes this one world church of apostasy. It's called Pascendi, Pascendi, written in 1907, and then Notre Charge, which was a letter written to the French bishops during his times, where this Pope saw the early beginnings of this one world church, if you will, that would extend above and beyond Catholic doctrine, and it would involve everyone, not just Lutherans, not just the Orthodox, but even pagans, even atheists. So now we have Francis on the record saying, to a atheist just this past year, don't worry about just being an atheist, just obey your conscience and I'll meet you there. Well, that, my friends, is apostasy. That's not what the Catholic Church teaches whatsoever. So as relating it to this whole Q thing, and we talked briefly off air, I mean, what a great title for this episode, A Calm Before the Storm, because it's only going to get worse coming from the Vatican. This did not surprise us at all that Francis would be tampering with the Lord's Prayer, because he's been tampering with everything else since he supposedly has started his pontificate. He's been on record, Sean, I know you probably don't, not being Catholic, you probably haven't dug into this, but he's been on record as saying the old covenant is not revoked. Now, that to any Christian, just fundamentally speaking, sounds absurd. I mean, we have scripture. I think it's Hebrews 18:8 or 8:18, which talks about how the new covenant has abolished the old. I mean, what was the point of Jesus coming if the old covenant is not now abolished and now we're, the New Testament church? So Francis is what we call a modernist destroyer. I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert in the whole Anon thing, but I can just tell you that he's right on point in terms of we've got a calm coming before this storm, and the storm equals the Great Tribulation, in my opinion, that Jesus warned about.
I wanted to ask you this here as it relates to Q. What do you expect will come in 2018? It appears really possible to me that Trump is orchestrating a deep state counter coup against people like Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and that corrupt CIA deep state. And there is the potential that 2018 will be the year of traitors and pedophiles being arrested. Do you think that's possible, or do you think we're all just stretching, hoping to see the cup as half full when really it's not?
Well, that's certainly quite possible. For me, Sean, I'm not necessarily sold on Trump. There's a good majority of traditional Catholics who are not. There's a good portion who are. I believe that he is just being staged as a front, if you will, to stage the revolution in this country. Right now, we are on the verge of an economic collapse, which I'm sure you're probably more privy to because you have more economic analysts on your own show. But I do believe once this economic collapse happens, this clash between conservatives and liberals will ultimately take place. It'll just be bloodshed everywhere. And then, of course, we're on the verge of world war. So for me, in terms of an actual fight back against the deep state or the New World Order itself, anyone who's studied history knows they play both sides of the fence, even with Hitler being funded by the Zionists of his time. So I'm not personally sold on Trump. I try not to make it a point of contention between other Christians, but that's just my own opinion. Bottom line is, folks, we are going to see revolution because that's what the New World Order wants. They want revolution in this country. They want chaos on every level because they must stage or lay the foundation for people getting ready and getting used to this Antichrist figure, which is about to step onto the scene, which is something I tried to mention to Sean off air very briefly, that this Antichrist figure, New Age figure, Maitreya, will be stepping onto the scene here shortly after the economic collapse. And one of the things for me, Sean, again, I can only speak from my perspective, perhaps we see it a little bit differently, is we see Trump always giving this kind of A-OK hand sign. And he gives a lot of these hand signs that these not so, of the enemy. I'm trying to put this mildly. And anyway, that's the hand sign of Maitreya, by the way, is the 666 Cult of Man hand sign. So I don't know. That's just my perspective on it. What are we going to see from the church side of things? Well, you're going to see further devastation within the Catholic Church. There's now in the workings of this new ecumenical right, which will stage not only Catholics, but Lutherans, Orthodox, and everyone will just kind of get together. We'll lay aside doctrine, they'll say, and we all have to have a united humanity. And that's exactly what the New World Order wants, because they're trying to get things umbrellaed under this soon false prophet character who's going to arrive on the scene. And this is where we can go down another rabbit hole and start talking about the counterfeit baptism, the mark of the beast, things along that line. It's trying to further falsely unite humanity is what I'm saying. And I don't know. I mean, that's just my perspective on QAnon. But me personally, I'm not sold on Trump, Sean.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Would you concede that given what we all thought was coming, which was going to be a complete and total collapse of this country under essentially the Marxist rule of Hillary Clinton, I didn't think that Trump was going to win this election despite all of the apparent grassroots support he had. I mean, you compare the rallies he held to the pitiful sizes of the rallies she was able to muster. Clearly, people did not want her in the White House. And I think it's a real blessing that she didn't get in, wasn't able to steal it. Would you concede that it would have been much easier for this New World Order apparatus to get what they wanted with her in the White House because she was a willing puppet? And it does seem that he stands in some opposition to the Rothschild cabal, the satanic cabal. So much of this stuff seems to track back to child sex trafficking, which is a global problem known as pedogate, and in Washington, D.C., it's known as Pizzagate. Would you concede that we're a lot better off that Hillary didn't get in there, or do you really think this is just all part of some master plan?
I mean, overall, personally, yeah, I think it's a part of a master plan. But I will say this: I concede that it's bought us more time if you will. I mean, certainly Trump was the better choice than Hillary, fundamentally speaking, on just the whole issue of pro-life, which is how many traditional Catholics voted. They say on the basis that, he at least stood for pro-life. Even if you saw him as a puppet or not, hey, I got to vote for him. He's at least better than Hillary Clinton, which is what the church teaches. The church teaches you can vote for the lesser of two evils. All that I'm saying is I'm not bought that, somehow he's going to be like the leader of some, Christian counter-revolution or anything like that. If you look at some of his handlers, I forget what the guy's name is. I think Peel was his sidekick. He was a 33rd degree high-ranking Freemason. And there's just a lot of evidence. I've had other researchers on my show, such as William Engdahl, Wayne Madsen, and kind of just his Jewish mafia ties and this or that. I mean, we could talk a half hour on that. The bottom line is, yes, he's definitely the better choice of the two. I just think that he is going to be used as the figure that once this collapse happens, you'll see the liberals come out and they'll say, hey, look, Trump's way didn't work. We got to go with Clinton. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It's like we're being staged for it to where, they're going to pin this collapse on him. They'll pin, this war on him. They'll pin the revolution on him. And, that's how it's going to go. They ultimately want revolution no matter who's in there. But sadly, I think whoever comes after Trump it's going to be brutal. Like we'll be on the verge of the Great Tribulation, in my opinion.
Okay, well, and we can talk about Albert Pike's prediction of a third world war. We know that's what the Zionists want. That's what the satanic cabal wants, to drive humanity toward a third world war. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I do continue to see some strange things coming out of Trump, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. What do you think is the significance that he has recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, and I took a lot of backlash on from the traditional Catholic world. Again, it's probably like a 50-50 split. 50% think he's the real deal, 50% don't. From the earliest writers in church history, they warned that the Antichrist basically would rule from Jerusalem. So when we take a look at Scripture, and we're identifying, Babylon and the harlot and the city of seven hills, the early church followers interpret that as Rome/Jerusalem. The common opinion was that it was both. Some held one or the other. But the bottom line is there's a plan in place to have this third temple rebuilt. And the early church fathers said, when you see that starting to happen, it's the end. Like we're at the midnight hour. And so for us, I mean, as traditional Catholics, we're like, this is not a good thing. Because ultimately we know just how close we are to some of these other significant signs that we've already previously mentioned with the economic collapse and revolution and this or that. And we have these certain fake, phony Jews, the synagogue saying that we're going to rebuild this third temple. I've got a couple sources which would say it's only a few years away. We've got on record, I've done blogs on this, where these certain satanic Talmudic Jews say their messianic era is going to start in 2023. Folks, that's 5 years away. And that's not our Messiah they're talking about. This is the biblical Antichrist. Okay, so if we're 5 years or so away, we can kind of see how everything is being staged for that front. So Trump comes out and, declares what he declared. And now take a look at what's happened after that. Sean, everyone's now warring on both sides. You got this country coming out and saying, we're on this side of the fence. And that's exactly how Albert Pike stated it would be, right? The Zionists/Christians will war against, essentially Islam. And that's what's also important about the third secret of Fatima, is ultimately just the Fatima message in general warned that Russia would essentially lose it. They'll snap. Whether it's, the whole Ukraine issue with U.S. and NATO starting to step on the toes on their boundary over there or whatnot, Russia is going to backlash, and it is going to be awful. Our Lady of Fatima said that various nations would be annihilated. And I was just talking with Father Kramer on my show. Hope you all can listen to this. But there is in certain Catholic prophecies the suggestion that the West is virtually I don't want to use the word wiped out, but we're basically reduced to nothing. So it's not going to be a pretty scene, I don't think, here over in the West, sadly. And I know you've covered, the whole Zionist issue. You've had James Perloff on. I'm going to have him back on again this month. And so to us, that whole equating Trump with Zionism, it's like not a good thing. Whereas I think your everyday person who identifies as a Christian thinks that's a good thing. But from a traditional Catholic perspective, no, to us, that's a heresy, and we've got to try to avoid that. But it's a staging. It's a front. And, it'll be interesting to see if there will be a false flag in that area, perhaps recently. I don't know. Perhaps you've dug into it a little bit more yourself, but I suspect some type of major false flag to be happening over in the Middle East very soon to really kickstart World War III.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about what we're seeing going on in Iran right now, too. But before we do that, I'll just make the comment that you said, I think you said we're going to see really essentially the annihilation of the United States here in coming years. And I just pray that that's not correct. I pray that our cup really is half full and that this guy is really putting America first and that we have a chance to stand on our own 2 feet. I do think there is a great awakening around this country of people waking up to the fraud and corruption of the mainstream media. And they know they're being lied to. But just to back up what you said about the annihilation of the United States, we have that Deagle.com prediction here in coming years of the population of the United States being reduced by, I can't recall what the figure is, but it's 30, 40%, 50% of the population annihilated here, according to Deagle.com. And, that's just essentially Armageddon as far, in my mind. That would just be an Armageddon level of destruction to watch the population be reduced. But we can see what they're doing with what a lot of people think are weather weapons out in California, starting these fires.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we know what they want to do with the UN Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030 policies. And the question is, could Trump, even if he's the purest man on the planet, could he stand against all of this? Can he round up all the white knights to try to jail these people?
No, I mean, on the surface level, again, I've always just used this, to put this out to the public. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Even if you want to take the thesis that Trump is the real deal, all that I would say is to support my thesis. We have from Catholic prophecy, we also have from Scripture. We know it's going to get to a certain point where Christianity will be underground. The global dominant religion will be this new age religion under the Antichrist, where everyone, takes this counterfeit baptism and has to, take this mark so they could go out to Walmart and buy their stuffed turkeys or whatever they're going to buy. And, the bottom line, we have to continue to keep praying for this country. I certainly am not suggesting that to you. I have a saying on my own website, keep your eagle's wings spread in faith and hope. We have to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But Russia does indeed have secret weather weapons, which, in my opinion, is already affecting our country. And I'm sure you've covered geoengineering with Dane Wigington. I've also had him on, great guest to have on in this area. But
wait, though. Yes, absolutely. But let me jump in. Did you say Russia has them? Because but so does the United States. I mean, look at HARP. And I think the argument can be made that those weapons have been used on the domestic United States of America, and I think it's by the bad guys that are in control of those weapons like HARP, not necessarily the Russians.
Well, no, the Russians do have it. There's a great piece put out by a YouTube channel called Christus Rex. Look it up and watch this video. It's called Fatima, Russia's Secret Weather Weapons. And they have weapons right now, and they've had some of their top diplomats where they're just laughing, and they're talking about how they can literally sink Australia in a matter of minutes. They have one of their top diplomats come on and say basically they could vaporize the United States in 15 to 20 minutes, via these scalar technology. But I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, sir, of course it's domestic too. They've got HARP and all this other stuff that they're doing. And this is just ties back into our times, Sean, about man trying to play God. Everything is being staged to where the resources will become so narrow, if you will, to where they'll have to look to some dominant figure in the future, kind of like in Mad Max fashion, to go get your water. Where am I going to get my water? Where am I going to get my food? Well, you can't get any of this stuff unless you take this mark. And so that's ultimately what they're trying to do. If I'm not mistaken, I'm sure you read the protocols too. I think there was made mention of these wildfires that would happen before World War III. I've been trying to dig this up myself, looking back through the protocols, but bottom line is that this was one of the preliminary things that the Zionists said they would do shortly before World War III, and we did wake up. So it would only prove your point, Sean, that the vast majority are waking up to this whole scheme, if you will, this whole Ponzi scheme on every level, and that they know it, and we're approaching that midnight hour to where whatever technology they use, it's not going to be pretty on any side of the fence. And I didn't want to paint the picture that I think that, we're going to be, there'll only be like 10% of the population here in America. I'm just suggesting to you that the whole communist plan of, overtaking the West we're not too far from the fruition of that. I mean, they have obviously been controlling us on every level. I mean, look at our education system with Common Core. I mean, they got these FEMA camps set up. I mean, everything's in place. It's just they're making their final maneuvers right now. And, let's pray. Let's pray Trump is the real deal to where he can try to get some things across to kind of stave off. But it's not going to stop this tribulation coming. It'll actually just be the hand of God, which will ultimately crush God's enemies. I know you're not Catholic, Sean, but in the Catholic religion, we've been preparing for this event called the 3 days of darkness, in which it will actually kill the Antichrist and all the New World Order figures, in which 3/4 of humanity will die over the period of those 3 days alone. And so this is what I talk about when I go on radio shows, and there's certain things that as Catholics, we are doing to prepare for this event. But the bottom line is it's divine intervention that ultimately will wipe out the New World Order and the Antichrist. But we have to do our part. We've got to fight. We've got to continue to resist. I'm not saying, I'm an advocate of guns. Go out there and get your guns and get yourself prepared. But it's, there's not going to be some massive counter-revolution to where we as, a united Christendom, if you will, is going to overthrow the New World Order. It's not going to happen. It's going to come from God's hands himself.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I'm just playing devil's advocate. I do that a lot on this show because, again, I've always said I don't have all the answers. I just have a heck of a lot of questions, and I try to be very pragmatic about all of these issues. And I've never said that Trump is a savior, but I do definitely think that Hillary Clinton is a satanic figure, and I'm very, very thankful she's not in the White House, as I know you are. One thing I'd say, too, as it pertains to Trump is he has talked about dismantling Common Core and doing a lot of things that are good for families and good for the country, putting America first. So we're all for that. But again, in the interest of being pragmatic, though, I have to look at what's going on in Iran and think, well, isn't this a big coincidence? That was the next nation that Israel and really the deep state wanted to hit. They want to go into, they've been talking about going to war with Iran forever. And now we have this revolution happening, which a lot in my camp, a lot of folks, libertarians, a lot of the people on Twitter that I follow are really excited about what appears to be this natural uprising, this revolution in Iran. And I just can't help but think maybe it was fostered for just exactly this purpose, regime change, and for Israel to get its hands on Iran. I don't know. Your thoughts?
No, yeah. I mean, I was just on Twitter today. Did you see James Perloff and one of his tweets that went out there? And basically, it was kind of a little cartoon there, a little meme demonstrating how Trump, or, the implication that Trump was colluding in on what you're suggesting. And if I'm not mistaken, Iran is one of the last countries that doesn't have a central bank. Isn't that correct?
Bank, yeah, you're 100% right. Yep.
Yeah. So, what are we talking about? So, it's one of those things, Sean, where I don't know. People who say they're one thing, perhaps they are not. We can only stay on the surface level. And as you said, take a look at some of the things that Trump is doing. He also, has helped to defund Planned Parenthood in certain areas. And, there's just a lot of suggestions to me that suggest that I don't think he is who he says he is. Recently in the White House, he brought in, there was some celebration of one of the false gods, some pagan god, I forget. So while everyone was kind of paying attention to the whole, his advocacy for Christmas and things like that, I mean, he was also, had the menorah out there. He also brought in this pagan false religion and saying that, we all need to be, he's basically playing the part of the whole united humanity card as well. That also happens after these false flags I noticed in some of his talks. But yeah, it looks like Iran is the next country on the list. We'll see, what develops out of that. But ultimately, Sean, as you know, I think we're on the same page that there's not much left that the New World Order has to get across before some of the final. How do I put this? Before the final plan is ultimately unveiled. Of course, we know this Agenda 2030 bit, and if these certain satanic Talmudic Jews are talking about 2023, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, the whole seven-year tribulation, and it's going to be brutal, Sean.
Yeah. All right. Last question. You talked about the beast system, the mark of the beast, what Catholics are doing to prepare. What should we all know about this beast system and the mark of the beast? What can we keep our eyes open for so that we'll recognize it when it's coming? Clearly, if they say when your newborn baby comes, you got to chip him in the arm or the forehead, that would be a good sign. But in lieu of those obvious signs, what do you think are the most obvious signs of this mark of the beast system that's going to be rolling out?
Well, I think I think the obvious is that we're moving out of a paper money system into a digital economy. That would be the next thing. So you're seeing this kind of trend of all these various nations moving away from a paper money system, ban on cash. A lot of, banks won't even take cash if you're trying to pay for your mortgages, this or that. A lot of economies and even localized places of business in Europe don't even accept cash anymore. So this transition into the digital economy is, the next obvious step. But another glaring, sad trend is look how many people actually want to be microchipped. Have you seen the reports that are coming out? The one company out there in Wisconsin, it's just like people actually think it's trendy. Like, this is cool. And there's no doubt that the New World Order, that one of the plays they're going to have is they're going to use the whole refugee crisis and to keep us safe card. That's what I call it. We've got to keep you safe just in case you get taken away by one of these refugees, or we've got to keep these refugees tracked. So now the whole mass, the whole society has to be tracked so that it makes you feel better. And obviously we know it's a control tactic, a manipulative tactic. But then ultimately, what's interesting to note is the early church fathers, there was also another saint called Saint Hildegard, talked about this mark of the beast, relaying it to a counterfeit baptism. So sometimes we get hung up on the actual chip, which we can buy or sell. But this will be during the time, right, the great apostasy, when men are going to have to choose Christ or Antichrist. It's flat out right in your face, Sean. Who are you going to roll with? If you take this counterfeit baptism, if you will, and we really don't know exactly, what it will look like. We kind of see what it may appear. I don't know if you've seen some of these movies coming out, like Doctor Strange, where they kind of had that Maitreya Antichrist figure and it had that marking like on their forehead with all his masters around him. I mean, this is very much propaganda for the New Age Antichrist and his ascended masters that will show up onto the scene, which ties in with the whole alien agenda. That's a whole other 2-hour show. But the bottom line is how far are we away from that type of system? Again, if these certain Jews are saying 2023, that means we've got 5 years to move where we currently are, right, into the ultimate banning of cash altogether, into a digital economy, to getting everyone on board to taking this mark. And David Spangler, who was some top I forget what actually his position was in the UN, said that no one will be able to enter into this Luciferian New Age without taking this mark. So prepare now. Get yourself prepared right now. I'm not saying go out and build yourself an underground bunker and go buy put a tank on your credit card and wait for Armageddon to start. But the bottom line is you should be prudently prepping at this point, because Christianity as a whole is going underground. It'll be like, what's that movie called? Hunger Games. I mean, they really will be coming and hunting for us at a certain point. It sounds ludicrous right now, but take a look at some of the laws that are being enacted, Sean. We're seeing prayers being taken out of public school. Some coaches want to just pray with their teams and are now being suspended or even fired. I mean, there's an attack on Christianity in place, and it's coming not only from the Vatican, it's happening in our country. And they've got their little satellite puppets, if you will, that are just playing their part and preparing the way for this Antichrist Maitreya figure. I must mention this before we close. He is slated to show up on USA TV after this economic collapse. And I'll have V, the guerrilla economist, on, Rob Kirby, Bix Weir on this month. We're going to try to talk about this a little bit more. But if it does happen this year, as so many economists are saying, and the New Age is saying that this character will show up shortly there and after, it's quite possible that we actually see the biblical Antichrist by year's end on national TV, getting people warmed up to him and his socialist ideas and trying to, paint himself as, some type of savior figure. So I don't know, Sean. It's just it's one of those things where we just got to try to keep getting information out. And I just wanted to thank you and close, for all the work that you do. I know I check in every once in a while and get in on some of your reports, especially economically. And just keep up the good work. We got to keep pressing along. And, hopefully we can do these home and away interviews between my radio show and your program on a monthly basis going forward.
No, that sounds good, and I appreciate that feedback. Thanks, Eric, and the same to you. And I guess I said that was the final question. This will be the final question.
Sure.
Do you find it absolutely stunning that so many people still completely have their eyes closed spiritually. I'm astounded by the fact that there are a lot of people that when I do interviews like this, they think those of us who are either Christians or talk about the Luciferians are delusional. They don't see it. And it just, at this point, stuns me because it's never been more obvious that the people sitting atop the power structure of this planet are hardcore Luciferians, and a lot of people just don't see it.
Yeah, there was actually one mystic in the church. Her name was Blessed Anna Emmerich, and she had this one vision in which she's talking about the bishops of the world, but then also just the people in general. And she actually denoted how they were in a zombie-like state. Their minds were clouded in darkness. They weren't fully processing what they were actually seeing, meaning what they thought was reality truly wasn't reality. And we can obviously thank the communist dumbing down of the West. I mean, take a look. They're poisoning our air, our food, our water supply. The TV can't be trusted. People today, we live in a culture of self, I call it, on a spiritual level, right? This is what I'm writing about in my book, Fortress of the Soul. There's truly only two routes that you can take. You're either going to go the self-love route, which will get you to hell, or you're going to follow Jesus Christ in his sacred heart. We've got to continually, direct our heart's actions towards him. But for those who are just kind of sweeping this under the rug, these types of the video game players, the clubbers, the partiers, people who just really are not truly interested in this fight that we're in. And it's interesting to note from a Catholic perspective, again, this is what the Fatima message warned of, this apostasy in the church. And I would say the condition in the Catholic Church right now is the majority who identify themselves as a Catholic don't want to process it, Sean. They actually really see just how bad it is. It's much like your wife of 10 years. You walk in on her sleeping with someone else. You see what's happening. You don't want to process it. Here's supposedly my best friend. We've been together so long, and this is how Catholics today try to decompress everything, and just Christians in general. I would suppose. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for outside of the Catholic religion, but the majority of Catholics today are literally following the principles of the Novus Ordo religion of the Antichrist, which will be formalized here soon, and they're calling themselves Catholic. And then on top of that, they're labeling people like me heretics for actually standing up for what the church had always taught for centuries. So that's the times we're in. The only way that this can get corrected is through God's hands. Again, I don't want anyone to come out of this, suggesting, oh, well, he's just, he's a pastor. You just lay down and go find your bunker. No, we got to get out there and fight. There's no doubt about it. And there will be a fight. But I'm just saying it's not going to be due to us that's ultimately going to throw the New World Order. It's going to be through God's hands and his intervention that ultimately these Luciferian freaks, the Antichrist and his minions, that will ultimately be destroyed. So again, I appreciate you having me on, Sean, and look forward to our next talk, and we'll just keep going through the issues and warning the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, if you want to check out any of the recent interviews Eric has done, hop over to TradCatKnight. That's KNIGHT on YouTube. Our guest has been Eric Gajewski, TradCatKnight. Eric, thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate your support. If you want to get some real physical gold and silver in your hands to protect yourself against the coming collapse, click the SD Bullion banner at the top of SGT Report and go visit our friends. They'll give you a great deal. Thanks for visiting us for real news 24/7 at sgtreport.com. God bless.
These indictments are going to be served, and some of the people that are arrested and perp walked are going to be absolute shockers to the public.